Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is talking up his capacity to forge strong ties with Donald Trump. He says the president-elect will see value in the relationship he has with Pacific leaders, putting him in a better position to negotiate with the incoming administration than Peter Dutton. Joining me for more on this is United States Study Center's Director of Research, Jared Mondschein. Hey there, Jared. Good to see you again. So do you think really that, Albanese versus Dutton, that Albanese has an advantage in terms of his relationship with the regional leaders?
Well, I think ultimately Australia has an advantage with the United States because of the structural dynamics that Australia benefits from, whether it be the decades-long security treaty or the free trade agreement or long cultural ties between the United States and Australia, but also the moves Australia has taken and continue to take under the Albanese government, including AUKUS, moving closer to the United States. So in many ways, I think it really doesn't matter all that much who the prime minister is, because structurally the U.S. will be committed to working with Australia regardless of who the prime minister is.
Really? You think personal dynamics, relationships don't matter that much? And of course, we've got our Ambassador Rudd having made those disparaging remarks about the president-elect.
Yeah, and then Ambassador Rudd has also come under fire from more progressive media outlets for meeting with the America First Policy Institute, because he was doing his job as an ambassador and reaching across the aisle and meeting with and working with potential Trump administration officials. I think the U.S.-Australia alliance is far bigger than any one prime minister or any one president. I mean, there's a reason that there have been two state dinners for Australia over the past few years. One by Donald Trump, the other by Joe Biden. It's not because Joe Biden and Donald Trump are very similar. If anything, they couldn't be more different. It's just that the structural dynamics of the U.S. foreign policy, in which there's far more bipartisan consensus than people realize, will be the same, even in a Trump administration. Domestically, I think things will look pretty different under a Trump administration in the U.S., but on the foreign policy front, I think in many ways, the structural dynamics keep it going in the same direction, regardless of who the prime minister or the president is.
Even taking into consideration our trade relationship with China?
Yeah, I think that's something that I think everyone is focusing on, including the United States. We have to be honest about the dynamics here, where China is the #1 trading partner of over 100 countries in the world, and I think that only more attention is going to be drawn to that dynamic. And so, if there is, for example, a contingency in Taiwan, we saw what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. And how a lot of countries maybe outside of the developed world had a hard time distancing themselves from Russia. Now, if you look at a contingency here in the region closer with Taiwan, are countries going to be willing or able to make that tough choice in terms of economically distancing themselves from China? I think that's a question for Australia, but also everyone in Asia and around the world, given how huge of an economic power China has become over the last few decades. And so I think that's a dynamic that is going to be a challenge for every government, including the United States, which imports a considerable amount of goods and services from China as well.
To something more specific, which is Trump and his legal team trying to delay the hush money trial sentencing supposed to take place Friday, US time. Do you think the Supreme Court will intervene? And if not, what ramifications will there be?
Well, I should first say that I'm not a lawyer, but from everything I've seen, I haven't seen the Supreme Court wanting to weigh in too much on cases involving the president if they don't absolutely have to. And so I think this is something that the Supreme Court would, on the whole, rather wipe its hands of and let the lower courts deal with it themselves. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump is president, regardless of what happens with that court case. The constitutional limitations of what a president can do are pretty, or can be, in terms of what makes them eligible to be president, are pretty clearly defined. And I think nothing involving that case has any ramifications for what he can and could do as president.
But won't leaving a criminal record be somewhat of a negative?
Well, it hasn't been a negative thus far. In many ways, he faced more legal challenges before the election, and he still got more voters, both in the electoral college, but also in the popular vote, than Kamala Harris did. So at the end of the day, the US democratic system is clearly defined in the Constitution and not limited by any legal personal matters that the individual elected president has faced outside of impeachment. And Donald Trump defeated both impeachment trials against himself.
Then why try to delay it?
Because there's nothing politically to gain from basically engaging in that sort of allowing that sort of negative publicity to go to him, to basically to take place. More than anything else, that's been the playbook of every Trump trial. They delay as much as possible, and I think their strategy has proven to be a successful one for them, because he has basically not had to face a lot of the trials due to him being a political candidate and then winning the actual election.
Thanks so much. Great to talk to you. Jared Mondschein from the United States Study Center at Sydney University.